Kagame's Paradox: Insulting Donors While Thriving on Their Aid, written by Gabriel Ndayishimiye. Kagame brazenly insulted Western donors as idiots, even as his regime survives on their lifeblood of financial aid. This calculated derision shrouds a dark irony. The very entities he mocks are the ones propping up his authority. This stark contradiction not only underscores the paradox of defiance supported by dependency, but also exemplifies what Hegel termed the cunning of reason. In Hegelian terms, Kagame's rhetoric of defiance, though seemingly oppositional, ultimately sustains the very structures of dependency he critiques. Hegel's concept of the cunning of reason explains this paradox. Individuals in pursuing personal or political goals often advance a broader rational order unbeknownst to themselves. Kagame's attempts to project sovereignty and independence through sharp critiques of donor dependency ironically strengthen the framework of external reliance, as his actions perpetuate the financial support that props up his regime. Thus, his rhetoric masks dependence while unintentionally reinforcing it, encapsulating the complex interplay between agency and systemic perpetuation. Hegel's concept of the cunning of reason encapsulates the idea that reason operates as an overarching force in history, subtly guiding events toward its own ends, often without the conscious awareness of those involved. This idea is central to Hegel's philosophy of history and reflects his belief that history is not random or chaotic, but rational and purposeful. Reason, in Hegel's view, drives the unfolding of human history through a dialectical process, ultimately aimed at realizing freedom and the self-consciousness of spirit, Geist. Human agents, with their passions, ambitions, and personal desires, often appear as the primary movers of historical events. However, Hegel suggests that these individuals are, in fact, unwitting instruments of reason. They pursue their own goals, often selfish or short-sighted, but their actions contribute to the realization of a larger rational plan. This dynamic allows reason to achieve its objectives indirectly, utilizing human actions as tools for its broader purpose. The actors themselves may remain unaware of the ultimate significance of their deeds, as their immediate concerns are shaped by personal motivations rather than an understanding of the grand historical narrative. The cunning of reason ensures that even irrational or destructive actions can result in rational outcomes. Wars, revolutions, and conflicts, which often appear as catastrophic events, can retrospectively be seen as necessary stages in humanity's progress. Historical figures such as Napoleon serve as emblematic examples in Hegel's framework. While Napoleon pursued personal ambition and glory, his conquests helped spread the ideals of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity across Europe. In doing so, he unwittingly advanced the historical movement toward human freedom. Similarly, Martin Luther's religious convictions fueled the Protestant Reformation, but the broader consequences of his actions fostered individualism and secularism, essential components of modern freedom. At the heart of the cunning of reason is the dialectical process, where contradictions drive historical progress. Conflicts between ideas, institutions, and forces create tensions that demand resolution, leading to new stages of development. Reason exploits these contradictions to propel history forward, ensuring that even unintended outcomes contribute to its ultimate goal. This interplay highlights the dual role of human agency and overarching rationality in shaping history. While this perspective offers a sense of historical optimism, suggesting that history moves toward a rational and meaningful end, it also raises ethical and philosophical questions. The instrumentalization of individual lives and actions by reason can seem unsettling. It implies that human suffering, sacrifice, and ambition are subsumed into a larger purpose beyond the comprehension of those who experience them. Such a view challenges traditional notions of agency and freedom, presenting individuals as both active participants and pawns in the grand historical narrative. The cunning of reason invites reflection on the relationship between personal motivations and the broader forces of history. It reveals a dynamic where human passions and conflicts, seemingly disconnected from rationality, are integral to the unfolding of reason's goals. For Hegel, this process underscores the rationality of history, even in its apparent chaos. Through the cunning of reason, history becomes a story of progress, where the unintended consequences of human actions serve the ultimate purpose of realizing freedom and self-consciousness. This profound interplay between individual agency and universal rationality remains one of Hegel's most thought-provoking contributions to philosophical thought. This idea finds a striking parallel in Kagame's actions. His critiques of donors, while ostensibly aimed at projecting sovereignty and independence, paradoxically bolster the very structures of dependency he claims to reject. By publicly denouncing the sources of Rwanda's aid, Kagame cultivates an image of defiance and resilience. However, in reality, his reliance on this financial support entrenches Rwanda's dependence. In Hegelian terms, Kagame's rhetoric operates as an unwitting instrument of a broader rational order, maintaining a system of dependency under the guise of resistance. This alignment between Hegel's concept and Kagame's actions reveals the subtle ways in which individual agency and systemic perpetuation intersect, challenging the perception of autonomy while reinforcing the structural forces at play. This defiance, marked by Kagame's insulting rhetoric toward donors, attempts to project sovereignty, but instead underscores a paradox. His harsh criticism of the very sources of Rwanda's aid creates an illusion of independence that lacks genuine substance. Kagame redirects attention from Rwanda's dependence and internal vulnerabilities to a defiant posture by emphasizing narratives of sovereignty and self-reliance. Kagame's frequent public insults toward both the donors providing aid and African counterparts he labels as less independent are calculated provocations. These remarks reinforce his narrative of Rwanda's exceptionalism, positioning it as uniquely resilient and self-reliant, even as the country remains deeply dependent on external support. This duality allows Kagame to project defiance and dominance on the global stage, while maintaining the aid that underpins his administration. Yet, this delicate balancing act is fraught with contradictions. While Kagame presents a facade of independence, his reliance on donor relationships reveals a governance model built on fragile foundations. This paradox forces a critical question. Can Rwanda sustain its defiant rhetoric without jeopardizing the very support that sustains it? Even if this approach succeeds in the short term, what long-term challenges await Rwanda in a post-Kagame era? Like all authoritarian regimes, Kagame's governance is transient. When Rwanda's centralized power begins to fracture in his absence, Kagame will inevitably frame the collapse as proof of the necessity of a strong man to hold the nation together. This narrative, however, ignores the deeper reality. The failure to build resilient institutions and diversify governance has left the country precariously dependent on both aid and authoritarian control. Ultimately, Rwanda's long-term stability hinges not on the presence of a strongman, but on the strength of its institutions, a foundation Kagame has actively neglected. Kagame's strategy of defiance and rhetorical dominance, particularly when aimed at donors, is emblematic of a precarious political balancing act. While this approach may enhance his image as a self-assured leader, resisting foreign interference, it is a high-stakes gamble that underscores the fragility of his governance. By insulting or belittling the donors who provide critical financial support, Kagame risks alienating the very entities that underpin Rwanda's economic and developmental stability. This strategy has a dual-edged appeal. Domestically, it allows Kagame to project strength and independence, fostering a narrative of sovereignty and self-reliance. Such rhetoric resonates with a post-colonial audience wary of external influence, consolidating his image as a leader who prioritizes national dignity over foreign control. Internationally, it signals to other African leaders and critics of Western intervention that Kagame is willing to challenge donor nations openly, positioning himself as a champion of African autonomy. However, this approach is fraught with risks that could unravel the delicate equilibrium sustaining Rwanda's progress. The reliance on donor aid in Rwanda's post-genocide reconstruction is profound. Foreign assistance funds vital programs in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, forming the backbone of Rwanda's development model. A significant portion of the national budget is supported by external aid, making donor patience a critical factor in maintaining stability. Kagame's rhetoric of defiance, while potent in its symbolism, could be interpreted by donors as ingratitude or a dismissal of their contributions. Such a perception risks triggering a reassessment of their engagement with Rwanda. If donors reduce or withdraw aid, the economic consequences could ripple across the nation, destabilizing the very foundation of Kagame's governance and exposing the vulnerabilities of an aid-dependent system. This paradox highlights the limits of Kagame's rhetoric. While it may boost his domestic image, it places Rwanda's economic and developmental trajectory at the mercy of donor reactions. A shift in global priorities, a growing focus on governance standards, or frustration with Kagame's defiance could lead to reduced financial support. Such outcomes would force Rwanda to confront its dependency and the inadequacies of its efforts to diversify economic sustainability. Kagame's strategy also reflects the broader challenges faced by post-colonial states in balancing sovereignty with global dependency. On the one hand, these nations seek to assert their independence and resist external pressures. On the other, their economies and social programs are often intricately tied to the aid and goodwill of donor countries. This tension reveals the structural inequalities in the global system, where the ideals of self-determination clash with the realities of financial dependence. Ultimately, Kagame's gamble serves as a stark reminder of the precarity of leadership in aid-dependent nations. It showcases the thin line between rhetorical strength and strategic miscalculation. While his defiance may resonate in the short term, its long-term success hinges on maintaining the delicate trust and goodwill of donors. Without careful navigation, the risks of alienating Rwanda's financial lifeline could overshadow any perceived gains in sovereignty or prestige. This dynamic not only shapes Rwanda's future, but also exemplifies the enduring complexities of post-colonial governance in a globalized world.